Welcome to another episode of Final Cut Pro Help Live. My name is Jared Ewing. Thank you so much for tuning in. We're gonna have a quick demo today. Got a question on another video and wanted to jump on here to give a demo of what we see here in this little clip here. So this will be looping so you can see it a couple times. But what you'll see is we have a background clip. In this case, it's just the clouds generator. And then there's a video that kind of shows up on the screen, but it does so using an ink kind of splash there, or splat that shows up on the screen. So I wanted to show you how to do this, how to create it. You can do this over anything. So if I put another video back there, you can see how the video then splats onto the screen. So you can certainly do this. You do need some assets to actually make it happen, but Final Cut Pro includes blend modes to make it actually possible. So let's go through this. I'm going to create a new project using Command N to create the new project. Always name your projects. It starts out as untitled project, but you want to put in a name here so that you can stay organized. Otherwise, things can get very messy very quickly there. So make sure to name these. A lot of people that reach out to me for support show me their screenshots and what they're working on. And in many cases, all I see is untitled library, untitled project. And when everything's called untitled, it makes it very hard to troubleshoot. So just make sure you're putting names in there, get used to it. If you need to, like this is a project name, you can add the word project in there. That can sometimes help in keeping organized. So now we have a new project. And I've added a couple clips into my browser here, the same one you saw in the opener there, and that's what we're going to use as well. I'm going to click on this drop down and show just my favorite clips because I've marked a couple favorites on here that we can use. And I'll just show you how to create this, and then I'll go back through getting some of the content. So if I wanted to create a clip, this was that clip I actually used. I'm just going to select it and drag it down onto the timeline, and then I'll do Shift Z, like zebra, to just zoom to fit the timeline. I'll lower the volume as well. We don't need to hear it for this clip. And then I have some of these ink splats ready to go. So in the opening video, you saw ink splat number 4 being used. So I'm just going to click and drag that down onto the timeline. You'll see in the viewer here when we're previewing it, you don't see anything because right now it's black on black, so you can't see what's actually happening there. If you do go into the Final Cut preferences, there's actually a preference under the playback tab where you can change the player background here. Instead of black, you can change it to be white. Or a lot of times for this type of work, I'll change it to this checkerboard option. And what checkerboard does is it puts a checkerboard back here. Now we can actually see that ink splat showing up there. So if that helps out, go into the Final Cut Pro preferences under playback and change the player background to checkerboard. I usually like to keep this on black because when you export your video, when it's on black, that's what it's going to look like. But checkerboard for more effects work like this, that's usually when I'll change it to that. Okay, anyway, here's our ink splat, and I'll just click and drag that down, and I'm making it a connected clip onto the project. So I'm just dragging it above the clip that it's going to be put over. And right now, if I play this, what you're going to see is the ink splat shows up, and then it disappears because this clip is just a very quick video. And then at the end, it does nothing. Nothing else shows up there. So what I'm actually going to do is move my playhead to the last frame of this clip here. And you can use the arrows up and down to navigate or left and right to go frame by frame. So if I do the arrow down, notice it goes to the last frame of this clip. And I'll hit the back arrow so that I'm actually on the last frame. If you've ever noticed this little shape down here in the lower right or lower left, that lets you know you're on the first frame, or in this case, the last frame. If it's over here, you're on the first frame. So if I hit the arrow up, you can see we have this bar on the left side there. We're at the first frame. If we go to the right and then back one, now we're on the last frame of the ink splat. And what I want to do is I want this ink splat to stay on the screen. So I'm actually going to retime it with a hold. And so you can either use the retime menu here or use the Shift H shortcut to hold that last frame there. So that way it stays up on the screen. And I'll just click and drag this retime all the way to the end of our project. That way that ink splat stays on there the whole time. Okay, so we retimed it to fit. Then with the ink splat selected, I'm going to go into the inspector, which you can use Command 4 or click on the icon all the way at the top right corner. And up here in the inspector, what we want to do is change the blend mode. So this first option here under compositing, this is in the video inspector. You're going to change the blend mode from normal to a different option here. And you could play with these to start getting used to it. But in this case, we're going to use this black ink splat as a stencil for what's below it. So I'm going to use the stencil alpha. The empty space that's here, that's like see-through, that's essentially what an alpha channel is. So this transparency that's here, or alpha, we're going to use that to make a stencil. So I'll click stencil alpha, and then you can see we have transparency there. So now we have our ink splat, and it's cutting out the clip that was below it, which is this this clip back here. If I want to, I can click on that clip that's in the background, go to my transform tool, and move it around. So if I wanted a different part of the clip to show up in the ink splat, I can certainly go and do that to move it around. You can transform the clip in any way, rotating it, all of that, those different changes you would with any other clip. You could do the same thing with the ink splat. So if you select your splat, you can click and move that around as well, or shrink it. You could squish it, manipulate how that looks, or rotate it as well. If you like the ink splat in a different way, you can certainly do that. Okay, so if we play that, pretty straightforward. We have our little ink splat, and we're kind of ready for the next step at this point. We've created the effect. Now we want to put a background back there. So I'm going to go grab my clip up here that I used for the background, click and drag that underneath the ink splat clip, and to see what that looks like. And what you're going to see is a problem. In the viewer, we don't see the background clip showing up, because what's happening is those blend modes are going all the way down to the bottom clip here. So it's actually cutting out the bottom clip as well with that blend mode. So instead, I'm going to hit delete just to delete this clip, go back a step. What you can do is group these clips into a compound clip. That's usually what I like to do. So to do that, just click and drag across the two clips to select them. And on your keyboard, you can use the shortcut Option G to group those clips into a compound clip. And you'll want to name this clip. So I'm just going to call this clip 1. Make sure you give your names, just like I mentioned earlier. And now we have this compound clip. Essentially, it's just a group of those clips together. And now I can go and grab my background clip and put it below the other one. And now we see the ink splat clip stenciled out on top of the background. All right, and if we want to, we can go and move these around, use the transform tool, and manipulate and adjust that any way you want from there. A couple other things you can do. I'm going to do Shift Z on the timeline here to zoom to fit. If you want to, a lot of times these ink splats are not the primary footage, so you might not have it on the primary storyline. You can certainly select the clip and use Option Command Up arrow, and that lifts it from the primary storyline. And we could put our A-roll, our primary footage there on the primary storyline, and now the ink splat is up top. If you need to make any adjustments to this clip, it is a compound clip. Just double click on it to open it, make the change, and then you can go back. So if we wanted to change the way the splat is showing up on the screen, maybe we want it to be a little bit smaller, we could scale it down here around a part of the screen there, click done, and then use the timeline history back button to go back to the full project. This gap clip, if we don't need that, we can delete that out of there. All right, so now if we play it, don't need the audio, but if we play it there, you can see how that ink splat now comes onto the screen over the clip that was below it. All right, so let me show you one more example of that, just to go back through those same steps. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to put it into the comments or the chat there if you're watching this live. If you are watching it on a replay, you can always leave it in the comments, and I'll try to get back to you. All right, so again, going through those steps. First, add the clip that's going to have that ink splat or splat on it. And with that clip added, then add your splat. So I was using splat 4, but if we wanted to use a different one, we can go and check one of these other ones out. If you don't have a video of it, you might have a still image, like we do with something like this, or this one's a still. You can use that as well. Works the same way, just by dragging it down and applying the blend mode. But I know the videos are a little bit more interesting to watch, so let's use this splat 03. Drag that down and add it. I'm going to use the arrow down to go to the end of the clip, and then a left arrow to go back one frame. There we are on the last frame, and I can use Shift H to do a hold, a retime hold, and that just holds that last frame, meaning it's just going to stay on the last frame of this little splat animation for the rest of it. And then with the splat selected, in the video inspector, change the blend mode from normal to stencil alpha. Just so you know, if you want to do the reverse, you can play around with these. You can also do silhouette alpha, which essentially does the reverse, so then it's cutting through the clip to see what's behind it. So you can certainly do either of those with it. And then with stencil alpha all set, I can select these clips and use Option G to group them into a compound clip, like we saw earlier, and then putting a background there. A separate way that you could do this, say this is our clip and we have it on the back here. This is kind of a blend modes thing, and this can be a little confusing if you're not used to blend modes, but blend modes are telling all of these clips how they are mixing together on the timeline. So if we wanted to, we can actually take our clip that's on the bottom and put it all the way on the top. And obviously right now it's covering everything up. But with it on the top here, I can select it and change the blend mode to behind. And what that does is it tells this clip to show up behind everything else. Regardless of what's happening down here, just put this clip behind it. And so now you could see that that clip is visually behind all the other ones. Even though on the timeline it's on the top, that blend mode is forcing it behind all the rest of them. And then we got our little ink splat going on. So that is how you create the effect inside of Final Cut Pro. You may be wondering where to get these types of ink splats to be able to actually create that effect. And we're doing it with ink splats, but you can do this with any graphic, any design you have like this. As long as it is got some transparency, it has an alpha channel to it that allows you to create this effect. So if you have Apple's Motion software, which in the US, it's a $49 app on the App Store you can purchase and download. But in addition to getting the Motion app, it actually comes with a whole bunch of other plugins and kind of nifty content. And that's where I actually got all of these ink splats that you're seeing is from the Motion app. So let me show you that. I'm going to open up Motion and just show you where to find that content, because it's actually pretty cool. And you don't need to reset or kind of redo the entire process here. Use what's already been created. And when you open up Motion, this is the project browser. And on the left side under compositions, there's actually some pre-built compositions for you to get started with Motion. And the person that asked me this question, they wanted an ink splat or a splosh, kind of an ink drop showing up. Well, I know that there's actually a composition built into Motion that has this effect already created. So you can go through these and see some of them created over on the right side. But there's this one called Splash, and this has a bunch of these ink splats already kind of on the screens. And you might have even, I've seen this one all the time being used on people's videos where they just kind of use the template. They don't customize it too much, and you'll be able to see these. And they come from Motion. But if we want to get one of these ink splats, I can actually double click on this template to open it up into Motion. Let me move it over to my primary display here so you can actually see it. And the Motion's very complex. There's a lot to it. But in this project viewer, which is this left area next to the canvas, there's a media tab. Just click on that media tab, and you'll see all of the media files used to actually create this project. And you can click on these to open them up and see them. But these are a couple PSD Photoshop files that are in here. There's some splat movie files, which that's what these are. It's black on black, so we can't see it. But these are those ink splats that we were just using in Final Cut. So we can actually use these clips. You can right click or control click on one of these clips, say reveal in Finder, and it'll open up a Finder window and show you where that file actually is. And these are files that are buried in the Motion content of the application. So you want to make sure to copy this when you move it out of the folder. Don't move it. You want to actually copy it so it stays in here. But these are all the ink splats. And you can just bring those right into Final Cut to use those. So that's one place you can go to find them and use them. Motion also has on the left column here a library of content. So under the library tab, under this left column of stuff, just go down to content. And then you can scroll through and there's just an enormous amount of stuff in here that's been created and available for you. All the way at the bottom, let me shrink down this window a little bit so that we can see the controls at the bottom here. But all the way at the bottom left, there is a search button. So you can click on that search and then type in what you're looking for. So in this case, we knew that they're called splats, these ink splats. That's just what Motion calls them. So you may have to kind of tweak your search terms that you're using to find them. But if I know I'm looking for the splats, I can start typing in splat. And there's actually even more of them in here that are these colored ones. You'll see a little preview at the top when you click on them to see those ink splats. And you can move these into Motion and create them and use them and manipulate them, all that stuff. But these ones too, you can right click on the content that's here and say reveal in Finder. You'll find that original clip. Then you can import that and use that with those blend modes and other options that are built into Final Cut. If you don't have Motion, maybe you do have Photoshop or another app that allows you to design things, Illustrator, those types of apps. You can actually go into those apps and create a file that's got an alpha channel or transparency, and then bring that into Final Cut and use that with these blend modes to create these types of effects. Again, Photoshop, Illustrator, like Motion, costs money. It can be expensive. So if you're looking for something that can kind of design those types of files, but maybe aren't expensive, you can actually use Pages. So Pages, which is Apple's word processing application or document creation app. You can also use Keynote for this or Numbers, but Pages allows you to create documents. It's a free app that you get for having a Mac that you get from the App Store. You can go into Pages, create a Pages document, and there's a Shapes button at the top that I've showed in other videos, but you can go up to the Shape button, and on the left column here, there's tons of shapes built into Pages. You can actually go here and look for various objects and elements and use these for the transparency that shows up and working with those blend modes inside of Final Cut. So I know we're talking specifically about ink splats and those splats that show up. But if you want some other kind of shape, you can create it or work with it in here. So tons of stuff in there. You could also, under the shape menu, if we go back to the basic all the way at the top here, you have these first couple options that allow you to create and draw. There's also a pen tool up here you can click, and then you can start clicking to create a shape, very similar to what you might see with Bezier curves or other drawing apps and effects and that kind of stuff. But you can certainly go in here and draw some goofy looking shape that looks like an ink splat or a splash, something like that, and then copy that. So you'd copy the shape that's here. You can open up the preview app and paste it, and then be able to bring that in. We got time, so let me show a little demo of that. I've showed this as well in other videos that you can find, but it's just kind of fun to see. So if we want to use one of these shapes as the actual shape, and all of these are editable too. So if I use this duck, for example, if you double click on the duck, you'll be able to edit the points, the control points for it. We'll just make this one a bigger one here. And then with the shape selected, just do Command C to copy it. I'll use Command Spacebar to bring up my Spotlight search, type in preview. While in the preview app, I'm gonna do Command N to make a new document. Put it on my other screen, here he is. So now we have a new preview document, which is basically like an image. I can just do Command S to save this as a PNG with alpha. That's important, you gotta have that alpha channel there. So this might be my duck. We'll put it on the desktop. And now I have a image that is a duck that's got an alpha channel that I can drag and drop into my project. There's my duck, right? And with that selected, I can change the blend mode to a stencil alpha. And it'll go and stencil out what's below it into the duck image there. So you could spend a lot more time in Pages clicking and dragging and creating more custom shapes on what you want to show up, or other apps like Photoshop, Motion, all of those, and then bring it into Final Cut, add it to your project, and just this blend modes are where it's at there. So with the blend modes, we talked today about Stencil Alpha. I also showed the Silhouette Alpha, which allows you to do basically the reverse. So it'll cut out whatever your object is there and show what's behind it using the alpha channel of that clip, which it's transparency. We also showed behind. So whatever is on top here is going to show up behind the rest of the clips. So if I disable my bottom clip there, so this duck now, even though it's on the top layer, is showing up behind the rest of them. That's what happened in this example with this one being on top. And so those are the blend modes we looked at today. Certainly try out all the rest of them to see how it blends footage together. And you can create some pretty nifty effects using what's built into Final Cut without doing too much more to it. All right, and if you got any other questions, don't hesitate to put them down in the comments. We are going to be live some more this month and going forward.